Welcome to Attic Static. Today we have two stories for you, The Gait of the Glacial Guest and The Unbidden Roommate. Sit down, relax, and enjoy. The Gait of the Glacial Guest. September 14th, Day 1 of the isolation. The hum of the life support system is my only constant companion in this white wasteland. It's strange how silence can be so loud. It feels like a weight pressing against my eardrums. I spent most of today cataloging ice cores, but tonight, the station feels smaller than usual. Just me and the frost. September 18th. A peculiar thing happened this morning. When I stepped out of my bunk to make coffee, I noticed a single set of footprints in the dust of the corridor leading from the heavy reinforced door of the laboratory directly to the foot of my bed. They were perfectly shaped, slightly elongated, with toes that tapered into sharp points. The odd part? I hadn't left the bedroom since yesterday. It felt like a gift from an invisible friend. September 21st. The footprints are becoming more frequent. Now there are two sets. One set still leads from the lab to my bed, but a second set appears every morning, leading from the ventilation duct directly to my pillow. They aren't deep impressions, they are light, almost as if whatever made them was barely touching the ground. I find myself checking the hallway before I sleep, half expecting to see a shadow lingering in the corner. September 24th. The panic is starting to settle in my chest. Today, I woke up to find 3 sets of footprints. They all originated from different corners of the station, the kitchen, the storage locker, and the main airlock, and every single one of them ended precisely at my bedside. It's as if something was wandering the halls while I slept, exploring its territory before returning to claim me as the centerpiece. September 27th. I tried to stay awake last night to catch it in the act. At approximately 3 a.m., I heard a soft scritch slide sound on the floorboards. I opened my eyes and saw them, fresh, wet prints forming in real time. They weren't moving fast. They were deliberate. A set of prints emerged from the darkness of the ceiling joists, moved 3 paces forward, and stopped. Then another set appeared from behind the door, moving toward the bed. I didn't see a body, only the path it took. September 30th. The footprints are changing texture. They are no longer just wet mud-like marks. They look like frosted glass. And they're getting closer to my face. Last night, the prints started at the door, but instead of stopping at my bed, they continued across my chest while I was still lying there. When I woke up, the prints were pressed into my pajamas, as if something had stepped on me in its sleep. October 3rd. The station feels crowded now, even though it is still just me. Every time I enter a room, I see the trail. It's like a map of a ghost's journey. But tonight, there was something different. One set of prints led from the lab to my bed, but then they turned around and walked back toward the door, as if the creature had reached my bed, hesitated, and decided it wasn't quite ready to touch me yet. October 6th. I've stopped sleeping deeply. Every time I close my eyes, I feel the weight of observation. The prints are becoming frantic. They are no longer orderly lines. They are overlapping loops, swirling around my bed like a dancer performing a solo. Some footprints are huge, others are tiny. It seems the guest is growing more confident. It knows I am watching it. October 9th. The silence was broken today by a low, rhythmic thrumming. And then, the prints changed again. They were no longer coming from the doors or vents. They were appearing out of thin air in the middle of the room, converging on my bed like spokes on a wheel. I stayed perfectly still as a set of 3-toed marks appeared 2 inches from my nose and pressed downward, leaving a faint indentation in the floor as if something had leaned down to sniff me. October 12th. It happened tonight. The ultimate convergence. I woke up at dawn to find that. The footprints had finally reached their destination. There were no longer paths leading to the bed. There was only one massive, heavy set of prints directly over my body. And right in the center, where my head rested, was a single, perfect indentation, the mark of a forehead pressing into the earth. I sat up and saw it, a small pile of crystalline frost on my pillow, perfectly circular. The creature had finally moved from the hallway into my dreams. It didn't just visit me, it sat with me. And now, our next story. The Unbidden Roommate. I am writing this because the silence of the hallway is finally starting to feel heavy. For 3 weeks, I have lived in room 402 of Miller Hall alone. It was supposed to be my sanctuary during winter break, a time for deep study and solitary peace. But every night, I realized that alone was a lie. It began on the third night. I was sitting at my desk, the amber glow of my lamp cutting through the gloom of the dorm room. The air felt slightly denser than usual, as if someone had just exhaled into the space around me. Then came the sound, a soft, rhythmic thump from the corner where my trunk sat. It wasn't a heavy drop, it was the sound of something soft hitting fabric. I turned, expecting to see a falling sweater or perhaps a mouse. There was nothing, only the dust motes dancing in the light. By the fifth night, the subtle shift became undeniable. My morning coffee would be slightly cooler than when I left it, and my chair would be pulled out just an inch further than I had pushed it in. The most unsettling part was the lack of physical evidence. There were no muddy footprints, no lingering sense of perfume, and no ruffled blankets. Yet, every time I entered the room, it felt as though someone had just left a spot. Then came the guest. That is what I started to call it. I didn't see a face at first, only a presence. It was a shadow that didn't belong to any piece of furniture. It would linger by the window when I was sleeping, and I could feel its cool breath on the back of my neck in the morning. It wasn't a ghost, not exactly. Ghosts are memories. This felt like a physical entity that simply hadn't been introduced yet. On the 10th night, the guest became bold. As I sat reading, I heard the distinct sound of a page turning. My book was still open in my lap. I looked up and saw the shadow move from the corner to the foot of my bed. It didn't have a body so much as it had a shape, a tall, slender silhouette that seemed to shimmer like heat haze. It wasn't scary yet, it was just curious. It would watch me study, its head tilting slightly to the side. But on the 14th night, the atmosphere shifted from curious to intrusive. I woke up at 3 a.m. to find the guest standing directly over my pillow. It wasn't looking at the wall or the door, it was staring at me. Its face was a soft blur of features, like a watercolor painting that hadn't dried yet. When our eyes met, or where its eyes should have been, I didn't scream. I felt a profound sense of recognition. It wasn't an intruder, it was a tenant. That night, the guest did something peculiar. It reached out a long, translucent hand and touched my hair. The sensation wasn't cold like ice, but dry like old parchment. It lingered there for a second, then retreated. For the first time, I didn't feel like an observer of the mystery. I felt like a host. The tension peaked on the 18th night. A storm rolled in, rattling the window panes and making the room feel cavernous. The guest was frantic. It moved from the bed to the desk, then to the chair, circling me in a continuous loop. It seemed to be searching for something. I realized then that it wasn't just haunting the room. It was trying to fit into my life. Every time it moved, the air hummed with a low, vibrating frequency. I decided to speak to it. "Why are you here?" I whispered into the dark. The guest froze. It drifted toward me, its form becoming more defined. Its face settled into a gentle, yearning expression. It wasn't a haunting of fear, it was a haunting of loneliness. It had been waiting for a room that was empty enough to be filled. On the final night of break, I made my confession. I realized why I hadn't felt scared. You can't be afraid of someone who is trying their best to be part of your world. I reached out and took its hand, the parchment dry fingers wrapping around mine. The room suddenly glowed with a soft, pearlescent light, as if the guest were finally exhaling all its energy into the space. The next morning, when my roommate arrived for the new semester, he found me sitting at my desk, smiling. "Did you have a good break?" he asked, looking around the room. He didn't see the shadow in the corner or feel the lingering warmth by the bed. But as I looked at the empty space beside my chair, I saw a single, perfectly preserved leaf of parchment resting on the table, a gift from the guest who was no longer needed because they had finally been known. The end. Subscribe for more horror stories and make sure to like.